You don't belong in this cabin.
Ma'am, I just smell something burning.
I don't care what you smell.
It's from the back galley. It's procedure to report it.
Sit down and shut your mouth.
I paid for this seat, same as anyone.
Go back where people like you belong.
I'm only trying to keep this plane safe.
The slap cut her off. Blood touched her lip. Something cold and metal slipped loose in her blazer pocket. 10 minutes. That was all it would take for this captain to lose everything. Brooke Mitchell arrived at the gate 40 minutes early, the way she always did. She carried one slim leather briefcase and a coffee she never finished. To everyone around her, she looked like a tired professional heading home. A woman in a charcoal blazer. Nothing more. But Brooke did not wait the way other passengers waited. While they scrolled their phones, her eyes moved. She watched the ground crew load bags. She counted the seconds between the fuel truck's arrival and departure. She noticed which mechanic signed the logbook near the jet bridge and how fast he signed it. This was not nosiness. This was habit. 22 years of habit. Most of the travelers at Gate B12 would never guess what Brooke did for a living. That was the point. Today, she was not supposed to be anyone. Today, she was just a name on a manifest. Seat 3A, Meridian Airways flight to Denver. She liked it that way. People showed you the truth when they thought no one important was watching. The boarding call came. Brooke let the families and the frequent flyers go ahead of her. When she finally stepped onto the jet bridge, she paused for half a second at the aircraft door and breathed in. Recycled air, coffee, jet fuel, and something else. Faint, warm. The smell of plastic that had been heated a little too long. She filed it away and said nothing. At the front of the cabin stood the captain, greeting passengers with a thin, practiced smile. Her name tag read D. Whitfield, 4 gold stripes on each shoulder. She nodded at the men in suits. She complimented a little girl's backpack. Then her eyes landed on Brooke, and the smile cooled by 10 degrees. "First class is to your left," Whitfield said. "If you're sure that's your seat." "It is," Brooke said gently. "Thank you." She took 3A by the window and set her briefcase under the seat in front of her. She did not recline. She did not order a drink. She simply watched, the way she always watched. The flight attendants moved through their checks. A younger one, Megan Sutton, gave Brooke a long look and a longer pause before handing her a water. An older attendant, Claire Bennett, smiled warmly and asked if she needed anything. 2 people, 2 completely different welcomes. Brooke noticed that too. Then a man slid into the jump seat across the aisle for a moment to stow a bag. He wore 3 stripes. First Officer Grant Holloway. He caught Brooke's eye and gave her a small, easy nod. "Busy day up there?" Brooke asked. "Always," Holloway said, smiling. "But she runs a tight ship." His eyes flicked forward toward the cockpit, and something behind the smile tightened. Then he was gone. Brooke leaned back. She let the cabin settle around her. The doors closed. The safety briefing played. Megan demonstrated the oxygen mask with the enthusiasm of someone reading a parking ticket. The aircraft pushed back, taxied, and climbed into a flat gray sky. For the first hour, nothing happened, and that was the strange comfort of her job. Most flights were exactly like this. Quiet, smooth, boring in the best possible way. Boring meant safe. But Brooke could not let go of that smell. It was still there. Fainter now, then stronger, then faint again. It drifted from somewhere near the forward galley, behind a panel she could not see. Warm plastic, the ghost of something electrical, working harder than it should. She had read the reports. She knew what that smell could become at 35,000 feet in a sealed metal tube far from any runway. She knew that most in-flight fires gave you minutes, not hours, minutes. She had seen the photographs of what came after.
So she did the simplest thing a careful passenger could do. She waited for an attendant, kept her voice low, and asked a quiet question. "Excuse me, do you smell that? Like something burning? Up front?" Claire paused, uncertain. Megan, passing behind her, did not. "It's the ovens," Megan said flatly. "It's nothing," but it was not the ovens. And some part of Brooke, the part trained over 22 years, already knew this flight was about to become the kind she would have to write a report about. She just did not yet know how ugly that report would be. The smell did not go away. It grew. 20 minutes after Megan brushed her off, Brooke caught it again. Stronger now, sharper. It carried that bitter edge that clean ovens never have, the smell of insulation cooking against a hot wire. She turned toward the forward galley and watched a thin gray haze hang under the ceiling lights, so faint most people would call it a trick of the eye. Brooke did not call it a trick of the eye. She pressed the call button. Claire arrived first, her face already worried. "It's getting worse," Brooke said quietly. "That smell. There's haze near the ceiling. You need to tell the flight deck." Claire glanced up. She saw it too. Brooke could tell by the way her smile faltered. "I'll let the captain know," Claire said. But before she could move, Megan stepped in between them. "Ma'am, I already told you. It's the galley. The ovens run hot on this route." "Ovens don't smell like burning wire," Brooke said. "Please, just have someone check the panel."
"Are you a mechanic?" Megan asked, smiling without warmth. "No," Brooke said. "I'm a passenger, asking you to follow your own checklist." That was the wrong thing to say to Megan Sutton. Brooke saw it register. The word checklist landed like a challenge, and Megan turned and walked straight to the cockpit phone. She did not call to report a smell. She called to report a problem passenger. 2 minutes later, the cockpit door opened, and Captain Diane Whitfield stepped into the cabin. She did not look toward the galley. She did not sniff the air. She walked directly to row 3, planted herself in the aisle, and looked down at Brooke like a teacher who had already decided who broke the rules. "You're the one causing trouble back here," Whitfield said. "I'm not causing trouble," Brooke said. "I'm reporting a burning smell and visible haze near the forward galley. That's a safety issue." "My crew checked it. There's nothing wrong with my aircraft." With respect, no one opened the panel. I watched. A few heads turned. Whitfield heard them turn, and her voice rose to perform for them. "Let me explain something to you," she said. "I have flown for 19 years. I do not need a passenger telling me how to run a flight deck, especially not one who clearly bought the cheapest seat she could find and wandered up to first class." The words hit the cabin like cold water. A man in 2C lowered his magazine. Somewhere behind them, a phone camera rose an inch. "I paid for this seat," Brooke said evenly. "Same as anyone here." "Show me your boarding pass," Whitfield said suddenly. "Right now." Brooke reached into her jacket, drew out the pass, and held it up without a word. "First class, seat 3A. Paid in full." Whitfield barely glanced at it. "Anyone can print a ticket," she said, and a few nervous laughs rippled through the cabin.
The kind people give when they are afraid of the person in charge. Brooke did not raise her voice. She never did. But she did not sit back either. "Captain, I'm going to ask you one more time, on the record. Please send someone to inspect the forward galley electrical panel. If you refuse, I need your name and your refusal noted on the record." 2 small words. To anyone else, they meant nothing. To a trained ear, they should have been a siren. Whitfield did not hear a siren. She heard insolence. "On the record?" she repeated, stepping closer. "Who do you think you are?" "Someone trying to keep this plane safe." "No," Whitfield said. "You're a passenger who doesn't know her place." The cabin had gone very quiet. Claire stood frozen by the galley curtain, one hand pressed to her mouth. Holloway appeared in the cockpit doorway, drawn by the noise, his face tightening as he read the room. "Diane," he said carefully, "maybe we should just check the panel and move on." "Stay in the cockpit, Grant," Whitfield snapped without turning around. And that was the moment. The moment a careful captain would have stepped back, swallowed her pride, and made one phone call. Instead, Diane Whitfield doubled down on the worst decision of her career. She leaned down toward Brooke and lowered her voice to a hiss only the first rows could hear. "People like you always think the rules don't apply. Get up, walk to the back of the plane, and sit where you belong. Now." People like you. The phrase hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable.
Brooke met her eyes and stayed exactly where she was. "No," she said softly. "I'm staying in my seat, and you're going to check that panel." What happened next happened fast. Whitfield's hand came up and struck Brooke across the face. The slap cracked through the cabin like a snapped branch. A woman gasped. The man in 2C half rose from his seat. Brooke's head turned with the blow, and a thin line of blood opened at the corner of her lip, and something small and metal slipped from the inside pocket of her blazer, sliding down against the seatbelt buckle before she caught it in her palm. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Then Whitfield straightened, breathing hard, as if she were the one who had been wronged. "Are you filming?" she barked, spinning toward a businessman 3 rows back. "Put that phone away!" The businessman did not put the phone away. His name was Thomas Reed, and he had started recording the instant Whitfield said, "People like you." His hands were shaking, but he kept the camera level. "You just hit her," Reed said. "You hit a passenger." "She assaulted my authority," Whitfield said. "She refused a direct crew instruction. That's a federal offense. When we land, she's getting arrested, and all of you are my witnesses that she resisted." An older woman near the window found her voice. "Captain, please, she's bleeding." "Stay out of it," Whitfield said, and the woman shrank back into her seat. It was a stunning thing to watch. A woman who had just slapped a passenger, turning the story inside out in real time, daring anyone in the cabin to contradict her. And for a while, no one did. Megan moved through the rows like a manager containing a scene. "Folks, everything's under control. The captain's handling a disruptive passenger. Please stay seated." Disruptive passenger. The lie settled over the cabin and made everyone complicit. People looked at their hands. They looked out the windows. A few looked at Brooke with something like pity, but no one stood up. Claire took one step forward, then stopped when Megan caught her eye. Brooke sat very still through all of it. She pressed a cocktail napkin to her lip. She did not shout. She did not threaten. She simply slid the small metal object back into her inside pocket and rested her hand over it, the way you hold something you are not ready to show yet. Brooke could have ended it in 1 second. She could have produced the badge, said the words, and watched the captain's face collapse. But a fire
did not care about badges. If she revealed herself now, Whitfield might panic, might argue, might waste the very minutes the cabin could not spare. The badge could wait. The panel could not, because Brooke understood something the captain did not. The worst part of this flight was not the slap. The worst part was the haze still gathering near the ceiling, the wire still cooking behind that panel, and a captain so busy defending her pride that she had stopped flying the airplane. She had watched a cargo fire reduce a fuselage to ash in a training film once. The crew in that film had 9 minutes. The smell was stronger now. Brooke could taste it at the back of her throat. She looked at the forward galley, then at the cockpit door swinging shut behind Whitfield, and she did the math the way she had been trained to. Time to the nearest airport. Time for a hidden fire to reach a fuel line or a bundle of wiring. Time for a cabin full of people who had just watched her be humiliated into silence. Minutes. Maybe less. She closed her eyes for one breath. Then she opened her briefcase, took out a small notebook, and began to write down everything. Names, times, words, the exact phrasing of every refusal. If they all survived the next 10 minutes, someone was going to have to answer for this, and Brooke already knew it would be her job to make sure they did. Captain Whitfield did exactly what proud people do when they are wrong. She built a story to protect herself. She returned to the cockpit, picked up the radio, and called Denver Dispatch. Her voice was calm and official now, the rage smoothed into procedure. Denver, Meridian Flight requesting law enforcement to meet the aircraft at the gate. We have an unruly passenger, female, non-compliant, refused crew instructions, and became physical. The woman who had thrown the slap was now reporting the victim as the attacker. Up and down the cabin, the people who had seen the truth heard the lie travel out over the airwaves, and most of them said nothing. But not everyone. Thomas Reed leaned toward the aisle and spoke low. "I've got it on video. All of it. You're not alone in this." "Thank you," Brooke said. "Don't delete it. Whatever happens, don't delete it." "I won't." Claire knelt beside Brooke's seat under the cover of a service pass, pressing a small bag of ice wrapped in a napkin into her hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have said something. I wanted to." "You're saying something now," Brooke said gently. "That counts. Listen to me. Where's the nearest fire extinguisher and the smoke hood?" Claire blinked at the calm, specific question. "Forward galley. Both of them. Why?" "Because that smell is electrical. And it's getting worse. If you see smoke, you pull the galley power and you grab that extinguisher. Don't wait for permission. Can you do that?" Claire nodded slowly, something steadying in her face. A passenger had just given her a clearer instruction than her own captain had all day. And the smell was getting worse. As the aircraft began its descent into Denver, a faint popping sound came from behind the forward galley wall. The cabin lights flickered once, then again. A child started to cry. The haze near the ceiling thickened from a ghost into a visible smudge. People who had stayed silent during the slap now gripped their armrests. Because a burning smell is an opinion. Flickering lights and the smell of melting plastic are a warning. Brooke turned to the frightened mother across the aisle and spoke low and steady. "Keep his head down near your lap. Breathe slow. If anything changes, follow that flight attendant, not the captain." The woman nodded, clinging to the calm in Brooke's voice. In a cabin full of panic, the only person acting like a professional was the one they had all watched get hit. In the cockpit, Holloway's voice rose, no longer careful. Diane, the galley bus is showing a fault. I'm telling you, that passenger was right. We need to pull the power and call it in. We are not declaring anything on my flight, Whitfield said. We land, security takes her off, and we sort the paperwork on the ground. End of discussion. So Holloway did the one thing he could do without her. Quietly, against the wishes of his captain, he reached up and pulled the forward galley power himself. The popping stopped. The flickering eased. It was not a solution. It was a finger in a leaking dam. But it might have bought the cabin the very minutes Brooke had been counting. Brooke felt the power drop and understood exactly what it meant. Somewhere up front, one honest officer had finally listened. She filed that away, too. The aircraft dropped through the clouds. The runway lights of Denver appeared, then the long gray ribbon of the tarmac. Wheels touched down with a jolt and a roar of reverse thrust. The cabin exhaled. They were on the ground. They were alive. But it was not over. As the plane taxied toward the gate, Whitfield's voice came over the intercom, smooth as glass.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Denver. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have a passenger situation, and law enforcement will be boarding first. Do not stand until they have finished. A passenger situation. Every eye in first class slid toward Brooke. The napkin at her lip was spotted red. She looked, to a stranger, exactly like the troublemaker the captain had described. The aircraft stopped. The jet bridge swung in. The forward door opened with a hiss. 2 airport police officers stepped aboard. The first was a broad man with a calm, unhurried walk. His name tag read P. Hargrove. His partner followed, one hand resting near her belt. Whitfield came out of the cockpit to meet them, pointing down the aisle before they had said a word. That's her, seat 3A. She struck a member of my crew and refused every instruction. I want her removed and charged. Officer Hargrove looked down the aisle at the quiet woman in the charcoal blazer, the ice melting in her hand, blood drying on her lip. He started walking toward her. The whole cabin held its breath. And Brooke Mitchell, calm as still water, finally reached into the inside pocket of her blazer. Whitfield expected a phone, maybe a wallet, something to plead with. What Brooke drew out instead was a thin black leather case. She flipped it open with one practiced motion and held it up so the badge caught the light. A gold shield, a federal seal, a photo ID with her name beneath it in clean block letters. Brooke Mitchell, Senior Aviation Safety Inspector, Federal Aviation Administration. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. My name is Brooke Mitchell. I'm a Senior Aviation Safety Inspector with the FAA. I was conducting an anonymous line check on this flight. The words landed in the cabin like a second slap, except this one struck only one person. Officer Hargrove stopped in his tracks. His eyes moved from the badge to Brooke's split lip to the captain standing rigid by the cockpit door. 20 years of police instinct rearranged the entire scene in his head in under 2 seconds. He turned around, not toward Brooke, toward Whitfield. "Captain," he said slowly, "step back, please. Hands where I can see them." Whitfield's face went the color of paper. "That's not... She can't be. She was making trouble. She refused." "Ma'am," Hargrove said, "I need you to stop talking now." But Brooke was already moving, and her first words were not about herself. "Officer, the discipline can wait 2 minutes. There is an active electrical fault behind the forward galley wall. I need a mechanic and the fire crew at this aircraft now, before anyone deplanes." That was the moment the cabin understood what kind of person had been sitting in 3A all along. She had a badge in her hand,
a fresh cut on her mouth, and the woman who hit her standing 10 feet away. And the first thing out of her mouth was about keeping everyone safe.
She turned to Claire. "Show me the panel." Claire led her to the forward galley. Brooke knelt, pressed the back of her hand against the access cover, and felt the heat radiating through it. She did not open it. She knew better than to feed oxygen to whatever was behind it. "Feel that," she said quietly to Hargrove, who had followed. "That's not an oven. That panel is hot enough to burn you."
The ground crew arrived within minutes. Then a mechanic in a high-visibility vest. Then 2 firefighters with a thermal camera. The mechanic killed the power to the entire galley bus and carefully removed the access cover. Behind it, a bundle of wiring had melted into a black fused knot. One wire had burned clean through its insulation. The smell that rolled out was the same smell Brooke had reported over an hour earlier. The smell 2 crew members had called nothing. The smell a captain had refused to check. The firefighter with the thermal camera looked at the readout, then at Brooke. "Another 20 minutes at altitude," he said quietly, and this could have been a very different night. Nobody in the first few rows missed it. The passengers who had stayed silent during the slap now stared at the melted wires, and a cold understanding settled over them. The woman the captain had humiliated had been the only person on the aircraft trying to save their lives. Brooke stood, brushed off her knees, and finally allowed herself to address the captain directly. Whitfield had not moved. She stood frozen by the cockpit, watching her career catch fire in real time behind that galley panel. "You had 3 chances," Brooke said. Her voice was level, almost gentle, which made it worse. "I reported a burning smell. You dismissed it. I asked you to inspect the panel. You refused. I asked you, on the record, to note that refusal. You struck me instead." "I didn't know who you were," Whitfield said. The arrogance was gone. What was left sounded very small. "That's the point," Brooke said. "You weren't supposed to know. A line check only works when the crew doesn't know they're being watched. I wasn't testing whether you'd be polite to an inspector. I was testing how you treat a passenger you think is nobody." The silence in the cabin was absolute. "And now everyone knows the answer," Brooke said. First Officer Holloway stepped out of the cockpit. He looked at the melted wiring, then at his captain, and made a choice that would cost him a friendship and save his conscience. "For the record," he said to Officer Hargrove, "she reported it. I heard the whole thing. I pulled the galley power myself because the captain wouldn't. It's all on the cockpit voice recorder." Whitfield turned on him, stunned. "Grant!" "It's done, Diane," he said quietly. "It was done the second you raised your hand." Officer Hargrove stepped between them, not to protect the captain, but to begin doing his job properly. "Captain Whitfield, I'm detaining you pending investigation. You're not under arrest yet, but you are not leaving this airport until we sort out what happened on this aircraft. Do you understand?" Whitfield's mouth opened and closed. No story came out this time. There was no story left that the cabin, the cameras, and the melted wiring would not immediately contradict. Megan Sutton had gone very still by the galley curtain. Moments ago, she had been working the aisle, calling Brooke a disruptive passenger. Now, she could not meet anyone's eyes. She understood, finally, that she had not been backing up her captain. She had been helping cover up an assault and a safety failure in front of dozens of witnesses and at least one camera. Brooke turned to Thomas Reed, who still had his phone in his hand. "Sir, that video is now part of a federal safety investigation. Don't post it. Don't delete it. An investigator will contact you to take a certified copy. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am," Reed said, and for the first time all day, he smiled. Brooke looked down the cabin one more time, at the frightened mother, at the crying child, now quiet, at the dozens of strangers who had watched her bleed and said nothing, and who would carry the memory of their own silence home tonight. She did not gloat. She did not lecture them. She simply pressed Claire's melting bag of ice back to her lip, picked up her briefcase, and walked toward the open door, where the real work was only beginning. Because the slap was a crime. But the wires behind that panel were a warning. And Brooke Mitchell had built her entire career on a single belief. The worst disasters are the ones somebody saw coming and nobody listened. Within the hour, the investigation had a name, a room, and a clock. The room was a cramped airline office off the jet bridge with fluorescent lights and a long table. The clock was the FAA's, and it had started the moment Brooke opened her badge. Federal safety investigations do not wait for anyone to feel ready. Two people arrived to run it. The first was Director Ellen Foster, who managed the Regional Flight Standards District office. She was silver-haired, soft-spoken, and had personally investigated 3 fatal crashes. She did not raise her voice either. People at the top rarely need to. The second was Captain Russell Vaughn, Meridian Airways chief pilot. He had flown with Diane Whitfield years ago. He arrived hoping this was a misunderstanding. He stopped hoping the moment he saw the melted wiring photos. Before the questions began, a paramedic from the airport clinic cleaned and taped the cut on Brooke's lip. It was minor. It would heal in a week. Foster watched the paramedic work and said, evenly, that the photograph of that lip would appear in a federal file by morning. A captain had put it there. That fact would not heal in a week. "Walk me through it," Foster said, opening a folder. From the first report of the smell, Brooke walked her through it. Calm, sequential, times, words, decisions. She had written it all in her notebook while it was still happening, and her account never wavered, because she was not remembering a story. She was reading her own contemporaneous notes. When she finished, Foster turned to the evidence. The evidence did not need much help. First came the cockpit voice recorder. Meridian's standard CVR captured the last 2 hours of audio, and the galley fault had occurred well inside that window. A technician played the relevant section in the small office, and the room went quiet. On the tape, you could hear Holloway's voice rising. "Diane, the galley bus is showing a fault. That passenger was right. We need to pull the power and call it in." And you could hear Whitfield's answer, cold and clear. "We are not declaring anything on my flight." There it was. Not a he said, she said. A recording. The captain, on tape, refusing to act on a confirmed electrical fault while a federal inspector sat in her cabin asking her to do exactly that. Foster made a small note and moved on. Second came the maintenance log. This was the part that made Captain Vaughn put his head in his hands. The aircraft's logbook showed 2 earlier reports for the same forward galley bus. A flickering light, an intermittent burning smell. Both had been signed off as no fault found. Both were on flights that Diane Whitfield had commanded. "She'd seen this before," Vaughn said slowly. "Twice. On her own aircraft." "And signed off on it twice," Foster said. "Which means when an inspector told her the galley was burning today, she didn't hear a stranger. She heard a problem she'd already decided didn't exist." The pattern was uglier than a single bad day. It was a habit of looking away. Vaughn turned to Whitfield, and for the first time his voice carried something personal. I gave you that aircraft, Diane. I vouched for you. 2 reports on the same bus, and you signed them away like they were nothing. Whitfield started to answer. He held up a hand. Don't. I've read the log. I've seen the wiring. There's no version of this where you were unlucky. It was not the FAA talking now. It was a colleague of 20 years, realizing he had trusted the wrong person with 300 lives. The lead mechanic came in to deliver his preliminary finding. He set a charred connector on the table. Arcing fault, he said. This was minutes from open flame. If somebody hadn't killed the galley power when they did, we'd be having a very different conversation tonight, and not in this room. He looked at Holloway, not Whitfield, when he said it. Third came Thomas Reed's video. An investigator took a certified copy on the spot. They watched it once, in silence, on the small office screen. The footage was steady enough. It caught the words, "people like you." It caught the slap. It caught Whitfield spinning to the camera and announcing that Brooke would be arrested. There is a particular kind of silence that follows watching someone destroy themselves on video. The office held that silence for a long moment. Fourth came the witnesses. One by one, passengers gave statements. The man in 2C, the older woman by the window, the frightened mother, who described a federal inspector calmly telling her how to keep her son safe while the captain screamed about authority. None of their accounts contradicted each other. All of them contradicted the captain. One statement stood out. A college student in 7B had written only 2 lines. She asked the captain to check for a fire. The captain hit her for it. I'll never forget that I just sat there. Foster read it twice. It was, she thought, the whole case in 20 words, written by a teenager who had learned something about courage the hard way. And then there was the crew. Holloway went first, and he did not hide behind anything. She reported the smell early and clearly, he said. I believed her. I said so. I pulled the galley power against the captain's direct order because I was scared we were going to have a fire at altitude. If that's insubordination, I'll own it. I'd do it again. Foster looked at him for a moment. It's not insubordination to refuse to help endanger an aircraft, First Officer. Write down exactly what you just told me. Claire Bennett went next, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. She followed every procedure right, Claire said. She was calmer than any of us. She asked me where the extinguisher was. She told me not to wait for permission if I saw smoke. The captain told me to ignore her. I almost did. I'll regret that for a long time. Then it was Megan Sutton's turn, and Megan tried something different. I was following my captain's lead, she said. That's what we're trained to do. Chain of command. Foster let the words sit, then answered them gently, which was worse than if she had shouted. Chain of command keeps an aircraft safe when the person at the top is doing their job. It is not a license to help cover up an assault. You called a federal inspector a disruptive passenger over the cabin intercom. You repeated a false story to dozens of people. We will be looking very closely at that.
Megan had no answer. The chain of command, it turned out, did not protect you when the chain itself was the problem. Through all of it, Diane Whitfield sat at the end of the table, watching her defenses fall one by one. She tried each of them anyway. The smell could have been the ovens, she said. It was a judgment call. Foster slid the melted wiring photo across the table. This is not an oven, and your own logbook shows you'd been warned about this exact system twice. The passenger was aggressive. I felt threatened.
We have 90 minutes of audio and a cabin full of witnesses, Foster said. Not one of them describes you as threatened. They describe you striking a seated woman who never raised a hand. Whitfield's jaw tightened. I want my union representative. I'm not saying another word without one.
That is your right, Foster said calmly, and it changes nothing on this table. A representative can advise you. They cannot erase a voice recording, unmelt a wire, or talk 50 witnesses out of what they saw. For a moment, Whitfield seemed to grasp the size of it. There was no procedure, no advocate, no chain of command big enough to climb out of this. I didn't know she was FAA, Whitfield said again. And there it was, the same defense, the one that gave the whole game away.
Brooke spoke then, for the first time in a while, quietly.
You keep saying that. I didn't know she was FAA. As if it would have been fine to treat me that way if I really had been nobody. As if the rules only apply when someone important is watching. She paused. But someone important is always watching, Captain. They just don't always have a badge. Sometimes they're a passenger. Sometimes they're a kid in 14C who's going to remember how the grown-ups acted today.
Whitfield looked at the table and said nothing. Director Foster closed her folder. She had seen enough.
Captain Whitfield, she said, here is where we are. We have a recorded refusal to act on a confirmed electrical fault in flight. We have a documented history of the same fault on your aircraft. We have video and multiple witnesses to a physical assault on a passenger who happens to be a federal safety inspector, but who would matter exactly as much if she weren't. This is no longer an internal disagreement. This is a safety case and a criminal one. She let that settle. As of this moment, I am recommending the emergency suspension of your airman certificate, effective immediately. You will not be flying this aircraft, or any aircraft, while this investigation proceeds. The word suspension landed, and Diane Whitfield finally understood that the worst part of her day was not behind her. It was just beginning. An officer escorted her out through the jet bridge, past the gate where passengers from her flight still lingered, giving statements. A few looked up as she passed. Nobody said a word. The captain, who had demanded the whole cabin watch her authority, now walked through their silence with her eyes on the floor.
Outside the small window, the aircraft she had commanded that morning sat dark at the gate, its forward galley taped off, mechanics climbing through it with flashlights. Hundreds of people had walked off that plane alive. Most of them would never know how close it had been. Brooke knew. She always knew. It was the loneliest part of the job, carrying the math of what almost happened while everyone else went home to dinner. She stood, thanked Director Foster, and stepped out onto the jet bridge to breathe. Through the window, the Denver sky had turned the deep blue of early evening. The investigation would take weeks. The paperwork would take months. But the most important thing had already happened in the first 10 minutes after the wheels touched down. A captain who hit a woman and ignored a fire was no longer flying airplanes. And the woman she had called nobody was still standing, still working, still doing the quiet job she had done for 22 years, making sure the people who looked away had to answer for it. The phrase Brooke had used on the jet bridge turned out to be exact. 10 minutes. That was the gap between the aircraft coming to a stop and Director Foster signing the emergency order that grounded Diane Whitfield. 10 minutes between a slap thrown in arrogance and a career that would never recover. But an emergency suspension is only the beginning. What followed was slower and far more final. The formal investigation took 6 weeks. It was not close.
The evidence Foster had gathered at the gate only grew. The full CVR transcript confirmed every word. The maintenance records confirmed the pattern. The certified video, the passenger statements, the mechanics report on the arcing fault. All of it pointed in one direction. Whitfield had ignored a genuine fire risk in flight, then assaulted the person who reported it, then lied to law enforcement to cover both. The FAA does not revoke an airman certificate lightly. A revocation is the heaviest sanction the agency can hand down. It is reserved for pilots who show they cannot be trusted with the lives in their care. Diane Whitfield's certificate was revoked. Permanently. She would never again sit in the left seat of a commercial aircraft. 19 years of flying, 4 gold stripes, the authority she had wielded like a weapon, all of it gone. Not because of who Brooke turned out to be, but because of what Whitfield had done before she knew. The criminal case ran on its own track. The county charged her with assault and with reckless endangerment, the second count built on the wiring she had refused to check. Months later, she accepted a plea. No prison, but a felony on her record, a fine, anger management, and a civil settlement with Brooke that Brooke directed, quietly, to an aviation safety scholarship. Meridian Airways did not wait for the courts. Within days, the airline terminated her employment. A company that puts a pilot on every advertisement cannot keep one who slaps a passenger on video and stares down a confirmed fire. The others did not escape the reckoning either. Megan Sutton was suspended without pay pending a full review. The intercom announcement, the false story, the long look she had given a black passenger before deciding she was a problem. All of it went into a file. She kept her job in the end, but only after retraining, probation, and a written record that would follow her for years. Some lessons do not come with a clean slate. And some people came out of that flight better than they went in. First Officer Grant Holloway, the man who had pulled the galley power against his captain's order, was not punished. He was commended. The airline's safety department cited his action as the decision that may have prevented a catastrophe. He had risked his career to do the right time in real time, with no badge in his pocket and no guarantee anyone would back him up. That, Foster noted in her report, is what professionalism actually looks like. Claire Bennett received a letter too. She had hesitated, and she knew it. But when it counted, she had brought the ice, asked where it hurt, and told the truth on the record. The airline thanked her for her honesty. Brooke, in a short note Claire kept in her locker for years, thanked her for her courage. As for Brooke Mitchell, she did what she always did. She filed her report. She closed the file, and she got on another flight the following week, anonymous again, just a tired woman in a charcoal blazer, watching the way a crew treated the people they thought were nobody. Because that was the whole point of the job. Not to catch the captain who was polite to inspectors. Anyone could be polite when they knew they were being graded. The job was to find out who people really were when they believed no one important was watching. Diane Whitfield had answered that question in front of a full cabin, a voice recorder, and a camera. And the answer had cost her everything she had spent 19 years building. 10 minutes after the wheels touched down, she had lost her license forever. But the truth was simpler and harder than that. She had not lost it in those 10 minutes. She had lost it the moment she raised her hand at a woman who only ever asked her to check. In the months that followed, the story did not stay inside a federal file. Meridian Airways changed how it handled safety reports. The airline rolled out a new policy. Any crew member, and any passenger who reports a possible safety hazard must have that report logged and checked, not dismissed. No employee can be punished for raising a concern that turns out to be wrong. The rule had a name inside the company. People called it the galley rule, though only a few knew the woman in 3A who inspired it. The FAA went further. Director Foster's team built the case into a training module for new inspectors and new pilots. It is taught now with 2 simple lessons side by side. The first is technical. A burning smell near an electrical panel is an emergency until proven otherwise. The second is human. The way you treat the person who reports a problem is part of safety, not separate from it. Brooke never asked for credit for any of it. She did go back once to a Meridian crew event where Grant Holloway and Claire Bennett were being recognized. She shook their hands. She told Holloway that pulling that breaker took more courage than any badge she carried. She told Claire that a small kindness offered at the worst moment still counts as bravery. Then she went home, the way she always did. No headlines, no speech, just one more flight made a little safer. And one more reminder that the person you underestimate may be the only one in the room telling you the truth. The captain had looked at a quiet woman and decided she was nobody. She had been wrong about that in every possible way. Most people never get a badge to prove their worth. They should not need one. So here is the question worth sitting with. How do you treat the people you think can do nothing for you? The waiter, the cleaner, the passenger in the seat you assume they could not afford. Because that, more than any title, is the real measure of a person. If this story moved you, leave a comment and tell me about a time you watched someone judged before they ever got to speak. Share it with someone who needs the reminder. And subscribe, because every story here is about the moment the overlooked finally get to stand. I'll be honest with you. The part that stays with me isn't the badge or the captain losing her wings. It's the silence. A whole cabin watched a woman get hit for telling the truth, and almost no one moved. I've thought about that a lot. Dignity was never something Brooke earned by flashing a badge. She had it the whole time, in seat 3A, with blood on her lip and nobody standing up for her. The badge didn't make her matter. She always mattered, long before anyone knew her title. So does the person sitting next to you right now. That's the part I really hope you carry out of here with you.